What's up, everybody? Good late afternoon or early evening for some of you, I suppose. I am still sick. No change in the last couple hours, which you wouldn't necessarily expect. And I'm also a little bit sick of something else. I'm not just sick because of some virus in my body. I'm sick of hearing about these rumors. And you knew there were going to be rumors popping off after the Panthers announced they were benching Bryce Young for Andy Dalton earlier this week. But I didn't necessarily think the Seattle Seahawks would become involved in those rumors, and they have. I saw a little bit from that NFL Rumors account. Now they'll tweet anything. That doesn't mean anything, but we're seeing it from other places as well. Like this field goals article I have on screen right now. ESPN reporter says, "Don't sleep on Seahawks as potential suitor for Bryce Young." So, granted, this doesn't seem to come from a place of inside information. This doesn't come from a place of him knowing John Schneider really wants Bryce Young, but this is kicking up some dust around the possibility of the Seahawks acquiring Bryce Young as, I guess, your quarterback of the future. And let's talk about this a little bit here because I see some people out there, some fans, some maybe uninvolved third parties as well, hyping this up a little bit and talking about how they think it makes sense. And look, on one level, I get it a little bit. This is a former number one overall pick. And, I followed this draft very closely. I was very attached to this draft as it was happening. He was, by the time draft day came around, the consensus number one overall pick. A vast majority of pundits and experts had him as the number one player. And say what you can make fun of Carolina if you want to. Most teams would have taken Bryce Young number one overall. I think some teams would not have, but I think that most teams in that position would have looked at Bryce Young as being the number one guy at the time. Now, I obviously didn't. I didn't like him at all. I had him as QB4. I had him in the 20s in my big board. And right now, that's actually looking like I was too generous. But I understand this idea of former number one overall pick who is still only 23 years old, and you can probably get him for cheap. On the surface, I understand where the excitement and hype is coming from. But we have 18 games, excuse me, sorry, 18 games worth of NFL evidence that he's not an NFL quarterback. We just do. And I know that there are some things that people default to saying he's still young, Panthers are bad, all this stuff. But look at the tape. What really excites you about Bryce Young? What makes you think that he's going to be a good quarterback in this league based on what we've seen in the NFL? And we're trying to be independent of what's going on in Carolina right now, right? Because, yeah, the situation in Carolina is bad, but part of the reason why the situation is bad is because of Bryce Young. If they had CJ Stroud, they probably would look a lot better, and people wouldn't be so down on them as a NFL franchise and organization right now because they just look better because they'd have a better quarterback. And when you look at this guy in terms of like his tools and you just look at him trying to be removed from the organization, what does Bryce Young have that is desirable? Does he have a cannon arm? No. His arm is fine, I guess. It's okay. Does he have tremendous mobility and escapability and speed and ability to run and be a dual threat? Doesn't seem like it. And does he have size? No, we definitely know that. I mean, we've always known that. Don't get me wrong. That one was a easy one. But we certainly didn't. We don't have that. Do we have great decision making? Doesn't seem like it. I know it's hard to evaluate that in a vacuum, and I know that it looked better at Alabama, but everything's going to look better at Alabama when you're throwing to the players that you're throwing to there, and you're getting all-American level play from guys like Evan Neal. Life's just going to be a little bit easier, and you're playing under the great Nick Saban, maybe the greatest college coach of all time, almost definitely the greatest college coach of all time. Of course it's going to look better. But what I would ask is to the Bryce Young apologists out there who are interested in a potential trade, when has Bryce Young flashed? Has there been any game or stretch of a couple games in his NFL career where he's looked good? Because Anthony Richardson is not off to a great start in his NFL career, but he's flashed, right? We've seen moments, we've seen games where he looks like a future superstar. Will Levis, not off to a great start in his NFL career, but he's flashed. He's had good moments, he's had good games. Where is it with Bryce Young? I don't see that with Bryce Young. I I think that even a quarterback like a Ryan Leaf has probably flashed more than Bryce Young has so far in Carolina. Like, I pulled up the game logs for last year because he played 16 games last year. And say what you will about this Carolina team being awful, they were, but they weren't the worst team in the league the previous year, were they? I mean, think about that for a second. Who were their quarterbacks in 2022? They had Sam Darnold start for a lot of that year. And they were not a terrible team. They weren't good. They were bad, but they weren't nearly this bad. And I'm just looking at these games. And just on the box score, okay? Because I guarantee you, if you really try to get into the nitty-gritty of like the tape and the analytics and the play-to-play tracking, it'll probably get worse for Bryce Young. But like, what games here did he actually play good? Kind of, sort of against Detroit, although I think a lot of this was garbage time. Probably the Packers game would be the closest you could get, right? Maybe you could say he flashed a little bit against Green Bay. But I'm not seeing any other games here that make me go, oh yeah, he might have had a bad season, but this game or this stretch of games or these moments make me think this guy can be really good in the league at some point. I'm not seeing it. And here's the other thing, the other element here with Bryce Young. When he came into the league, who did people compare him to? They compared him to Russell Wilson. And what part of Russell Wilson is going to really appeal to you when you're trying to evaluate these quarterbacks? The escapability, the mobility, the opportunity to make plays off script, the ability to make things happen with his legs. And we talk about this sometime on this channel with quarterback prospects. There are the ones who look like they're going to be mobile and a dual threat in college, and then they go to the NFL and they actually are, because they actually have that 4.5 or 4.55 speed. And then there are the quarterbacks who look like they're fast in college, but they actually run like a 4.75 or a 4.8, and they get to the NFL and they can't run away from anybody. So I'm looking at some of this stuff. For one, Bryce Young got sacked 62 times last year. Even Russell Wilson at his worst isn't getting sacked 62 times in a year. And he missed a game, by the way. And he missed the Seahawks game where Andy Dalton had pressure in his face the whole game. This number is easily like 67, 68 if he plays all 17 games. And he ran for 250 yards. He ran for 250 yards. It's a little bit better than like a Baker Mayfield, but you look at Russell Wilson. Let's scroll down here to his rushing stats in the early and middle parts of his career. He's hitting 500. He's getting up close to 600. One year he had 850. I think he actually leads the NFL history all time for most 500-yard rushing seasons by a quarterback. Could be wrong, but I think he does. And the one year he was around 250 was the year he was hurt. Remember 2016 when he got hurt and basically couldn't move for about a month, for 2 months? Yeah, that was the year where he only got to 250. Other than that, when you look at these early career and middle career seasons, he's giving you a lot with his legs. And Bryce Young, to me, looks like he might not have that. It's early. I know that there's also a question of like opportunity as well. I know that his yards per attempt isn't all that terrible. But part of the reason why you might not be running the ball as much is because you can't outrun anybody. Sorry, nose all congested. But you see what I'm getting at here? Like, what is the asset that Bryce Young brings that gets you excited about him as the Seahawks quarterback of the future? other than the fact that he put up numbers and won a bunch of games at Alabama, which also goes for Mac Jones, by the way. I don't think anybody's really coveting Mac Jones right now. So, also, one final thought. How long do you think Bryce Young is going to make it in the NFL? Like, I know that PFR lists him as being 204 pounds. We all know he's not 204 pounds. He's 185, maybe. Probably 185. 5'10", I think he's 5'9". I think that if you really look at his height compared to players that have known heights that are standing next to Bryce Young, you will see that he's more like 5'9". Russell Wilson was small, but in his prime, when he was actually like concerned about having the cushion to take hits in the NFL, first of all, he was like 5'11" probably. He was a little bit taller than Bryce Young, and that 2 inches makes a difference. But he was probably around 215, 220, maybe even more, because he had the speed to still run quickly and get to where he needed to go when he was 215, 220, 225. Now he's older, he doesn't, so I know he's slimmed down and he's taking the risk of getting injured more. But that doesn't change the fact that Russell Wilson could take hits in his prime and early in his career because he had some cushion on his body. Bryce Young doesn't. He's a stick figure out there. So even if you get him and you fix him and everything's good and you're able to turn him into a really good franchise quarterback, he's probably just going to get hurt next time he gets hit. He's already missed one game in his career because of injury, right? And this is when he's very young. This is when he's 22 years old. So I'm pretty down on this one, guys. We can do better. If we're trying to find a quarterback of the future for the Seattle Seahawks, we can do better. This is going to be hard for some people to hear. But at this point in time, I don't think I would trade Sam Howell for Bryce Young straight up. I think Sam Howell has a brighter future in the NFL. I'd rather have Sam Howell. He's also much cheaper, by the way. It's much easier to move off of him if he ends up not working out for you. And just overall, I look at Sam Howell and I think to myself, he looks like a guy who can make it in the NFL. He has NFL caliber size. He looks like somebody who can take a hit and keep going. Bryce Young, I feel like, is going to take a couple seasons worth of hits and then just have nothing left because he doesn't have Lamar's ability to escape the hits. Lamar is playing with fire, but at the very least, he's able to evade a lot of the big hits that he would be taking because he's so fast. Bryce Young, to me, looks like one of those Baker Mayfield types where he looked fast in college, but not really. He's just, it's not that different from Sam Howell, really. He's probably a little bit faster than a Sam Howell. So, I don't know what asset you would have to give up to get Bryce Young, by the way, but we already gave up an asset to get Sam Howell. We already gave up the equivalent of a 5th-round pick. Maybe you could get Bryce Young for like a 4th-round pick, but to me, you've already kind of made the exchange that you want to make there. Yeah, let me have Sam Howell and see what happens. Don't give me this guy who, I know that people make excuses for him. I know people give him a pass on stuff here and there. I know people kind of brush off some of the criticism because, oh, it's Carolina, they're terrible, and look at how good he was in college. But this guy looks like he's on track to be one of the top 3 biggest busts in NFL history. Because, again, I ask, where is he flashing? Is he flashing at all? Maybe you could find 1 or 2 games where he's looked good. Maybe. And I tell you, those games would not look nearly as good if you put them under a microscope. And I think you'll see a lot of the stuff that he does that is not... He can't overcome it. How is he going to overcome being 5'9"? You've probably seen the highlight of him jumping as he throws to get the ball over his offensive line. He's not growing taller. There's nothing he can do about that. So, it's a no for me, dog. It's a no. And I think if you really think about it, the thought of giving up any kind of an asset to acquire Bryce Young, it just doesn't make any sense. It's built purely off the hype machine of him being a number 1 overall pick a year and a half ago. It has nothing to do with what he's actually done on a football field. All right. Let me know what you guys think, though. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. And, yeah, Bryce Young, I understand the surface level interest, but I think once you get past that surface level, there's really not much there but a bad quarterback prospect who is headed towards a very short NFL career. See you guys later.